All right, so we're here to discuss our Kendrick Lamar cover video performance from my Berklee EPD Electronic Production and Design Faculty Concert live stream. It's a
Just a
mouthful.
mouthful.
Very long time.
And so I'm very happy to welcome here to the Zoom room my good friends and some of the most talented dudes I've ever met, Peter Antunes and Marcus Montero.
What's happening?
So we're just going to discuss this performance and how it was made and why we made some of the decisions we made. First of all, I guess it'd be good to talk about the song, right? The song, it's a Kendrick Lamar track. The three versions that I really dug into were he released it as a single, which was quite different. You know, he's doing that sort of childlike, the K dot voice, you know, and the hook is different. And then he did it on SNL a while later with the newer hook, and just using like a regular voice and with the live band and all that. And it's badass, right? All this whole performance here. I'm sure I can't play it because then it'll get like muted or who knows. I don't think I can play this and then put it in another video. So I'm not going to play it, but, I could put a link to that or something because it's a good watch. It's a
cool performance too.
Yeah, it's killer. And then it was a while later when the album came out, right? To Pimp a Butterfly, and on the album, it's this hook, but then like when they get into the bridge, like it cuts off and there's like a fight breaks out in the crowd and they don't even finish the song. So like this is really the only version that has that hook and has the entire song in it. You know, all three are amazing, but and in this one they go into another song at the end. Is it Mama? I think it's Mama.
Yeah,
I think that's the name of it. Which we didn't get that deep into it, because it was mostly about the I track that I wanted to try to reproduce, you know. But so that was the inspiration for the whole thing. And originally, you know, because I wanted to do something for this Berklee thing. Originally, I think what I pitched to you guys was let's do like a track that has samples in it, but we'll like perform the samples and then build it into the track, because the Kendrick Lamar track uses the Isley Brothers, That Lady, which is an interesting thing too, because there's Who's That Lady, and then years later they did That Lady, which is like the funkier 70s version.
Two different versions.
With that Santana kind of guitar, you know.
I didn't even know that until we started doing this.
Yeah, right. I mean, I had heard both versions, but I never really put it together and, you know, thought about it. But I mean, even in the Kendrick version, like they didn't sample it, they replayed it. You know, they might have sampled it when they were demoing the track or whatever, but they played it again. But so it's the Isley Brothers thing. And so going into it, I was thinking we'll just kind of do like the Isley Brothers tune and then like work it into the Kendrick tune as like a little like sampling adventure
or something. Yeah.
But then it turned into let's just do this tune because it's badass, right? And so what I did is I ended up grabbing, I created acapellas out of Kendrick's vocals. I ended up using all three versions. And I used software called Isotope RX to create acapellas from all three versions of the track. So like this verse is the single version. Right. So that's like the, you know, the K dot, the child voice. And then verse 2, that's from SNL. Okay, that first half of verse 3 is from SNL, but then this is from the album version. I think
That's from To Pimp a Butterfly, I think.
Yeah, right. So I ended up using all three versions of the tune to craft these acapellas. And then the vocoder from there is like Well, that gets a little more complicated because now I'm feeding the vocoder with both the guitar and the keyboard. But you know, before we even get any deeper into that, I just want to talk a little bit about how we ended up doing the video there and all that. I guess it was Pete's idea, right? Because I wanted to do it outside somewhere, which still would have been great doing it outside, but it was also November 1st and it would have been cold. So I think, Pete, it was your idea, right? To do it at No Probs.
Yeah.
So luckily
they were nice. Yeah, they were still open, but like no one was using that dining room. And I know that they have the live shows in there. It was just, it kind of made sense.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I played in there a bunch of times and so yeah, they're serving tacos in that little area right there in the photo, but their dining room hasn't been used since March. So, and Craig Paiva, shout outs to Craig Paiva. You know, I texted him like, hey, can we, and like, he didn't even need to know anything about it. He's like, I love it. Let's do it.
I love that.
Let us in and gave us the dining room for the day. The thing that's interesting about this, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because, it was, okay. So I didn't realize I had this one queued up next, but this is just
a Halloween adventure right there.
Yeah, we did it on November 1st, which was the day after Halloween, and right outside there was half a sexy lion costume with a menthol cigarette butt put out in it, which it was just, I thought it was great.
One shoe.
Yeah, but so
wow,
I have some old photos here to share. Of course, this is me and the two of you and Mike Jupin. This is on the 3rd floor of that same building because we used to rehearse upstairs from that restaurant 20 years ago when we were just babies.
Children.
Pete and I looking serious.
Oh yeah.
Seriously not legal to play in.
Seriously young.
This is also in the same building. This is on like the 2nd floor, right?
Oh, that was was that right outside the rehearsal room?
Yeah. And that, I think that looks, it says Kel down in the corner, but that looks like Doug.
It really does.
Yeah. It probably says Doug and Kel down in the corner.
Oh, right.
Which would have been my roommates at the time, right?
Right. Look how baggy our clothes are. Wow.
I know. And look at the fact that Marcus is the only one that looks like he knows how to pose for a band photo or even show up not wearing shorts. You know what I mean?
Birkenstocks.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Woo. Goofballs.
Yeah.
And then that's us up on the roof of the same building.
Oh yeah.
So to me, like that's all those things were reasons why I thought it was a great idea to do it there, you know, because it's a great spot and, you know, played there and it's got a cool look to it, but also like we have history there, you know? So yeah, I love that.
So many cables.
It's probably the end. Yeah, but considering what it would have been without the EAD, right? So Pete's setup here is, you know, drum kit, obviously, with the did you see the SPD in that first angle? I'm all over the place.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, okay. So there's the SPD. So that's triggering some samples off of Pete's Ableton, which isn't even I don't even think you hit play, right? You're just
No, I was just using the sounds from
it's just parked
and sending that to you.
Yeah. And then the EAD is that little box there.
Yeah, that's the module for it.
And that made this whole thing so much simpler for me because if it wasn't for that, I'd still be mixing the drums, you know, and we would have had mics all over the kit and it would have looked like a mic'd kit instead of just looking like a regular kit, you know?
We didn't even need an interface to record it. Like it goes straight in.
So the EAD, it's what, Yamaha EAD 10?
Yeah.
So real quick explanation of what that is. It mounts on the kick drum and it senses the kick and it gives me a MIDI output of the kick, but it also gives, it has like a couple of mics on the top of it that record the entire kit. And it just comes out of stereo out. And it's already got like compression and reverb on it and stuff. It's kind of like good to go. I mean, in the future, I think it'd be cool for us to work on making like other presets and stuff. I also just now that I've put this together and mixed it, I realized that having a snare mic would have been helpful because there were times where the snare gets a little drowned out. I actually ended up using the audio from your
From the phone?
from just a little bit to get a little bit more snare presence. But can you talk a little bit about why you have that and what you use it for?
The EAD?
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually bought the EAD. I play in the wedding circuit in Boston, and I haven't played weddings on the East Coast for it's been about 15 years, and I forgot how rowdy weddings are out here. Like everyone turns all the way up like all night long. It's loud, and it was the immediate solution for me to like run in-ears and still hear the whole band. So like you can see that I have that there's a little 6-channel mixer right next to the module. I'll bring that and I'll have the EAD run down channel 1, and then I'll get an XLR from the sound guy and then plug it into channel 2, and then I'll have a standalone app for they usually run like a Behringer or like a Midas board, and I can run my my monitor levels for the rest of the band just off my phone, so I can run in-ears for like the whole show and not be deaf by the end of the night, which is fantastic. But we found out that we can record without using an interface, without anything. It's just a MIDI cable to the laptop.
Well, because it's also an interface. So when it over USB, it's sending MIDI and audio, which is great. In this case, I just pulled the left and right out of it into my interface. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of other ways we could do it. But so when you've used this on gigs, you're not sending it to the sound person. You're just using it for your own ears.
I'm using it for my own use. They mic the whole kit. Yeah, but when I run in-ears, the reason that I don't like running in-ears when they mic a kit is because they never put up overheads. And if I'm swinging and I can hear my snare and my kick and I can't really hear the hi-hat or the crashes or the ride, say I'm like playing a pattern on the ride and I can't hear it because my in-ears are in. I mean, it's
interesting. Yeah. I mean, for this, like, because we could have gone into the studio and we could have, used 1,000 mics, but like for this setup, like my laptop was not only like my instrument doing my vocoding and all that stuff, but it was also tracking you guys doing the live sampling. And it was like, I mean, it got pretty hot, don't get me wrong. But I mean, that simplified things so much. That really made this, much more doable,
Yeah, it brought the gear level down to like, that we could do in like a day, like to set up, record, and get out of there. Like that was you can see the block right there.
Yeah, I mean, we had to oh yeah, there it is.
Yep.
We had to move all it's a restaurant. We had to move all the tables out of the way and put them back when we were done.
Yeah, I mean, it took longer for us to set up the lights and the cameras and the
than to play the tune. Yeah, seriously.
So this is the API Lunchbox. This is just taking a bunch of audio inputs, going through a Neve module and a couple API modules to make everything sound sweet, bruh.
Thing does sound sweet, bruh.
This is my little setup, which I also have set up right here, right now, next to me. The Akai LPD8, the Lipid, which it's really just some drum triggers and some knobs. I like this one because these are not encoders. They're knobs with a stop point at the top and the bottom, instead of it being like you just spin it forever. It actually has a little bit of a stop, so that for this kind of control, I like that. And I also have the pads set up as on-off switches, momentary on-off switches, so I can hold an effect and let go, right? So like the delay or the chopper, this kind of square wave, like tremolo thing. And then on the knobs, I just had like the pitch control and the pitch envelope, to do the work in the ear. And then of course the Novation Launchpad for a variety of stuff, including like the kind of display things that I was doing. And then the hardest thing to see is this the ROLI Seaboard block, which was a late addition for me. I was originally using this, which I still prefer in some ways, because doing some of that choppy stuff with this, because it springs back and everything, it works.
Yeah,
works a lot better. But
mushier.
Yeah, this is super mushy, but I mean, it's so cool. And there's things that you can do with this, the sliding and all that. But I still gotta work on the settings a bit to get it to be like a little bit more responsive, and I gotta work on my technique so that I can play it a little bit more, I don't know, rhythmically, The laptop, I got this little label that my kids made. It's a funny moment because I remember like we were making labels to put on stuff, and I remember Viola had made a few labels, and I was like, all right, that's enough labels already. We don't want to waste it. And she was like, but I made one that says Daddy is awesome.
Okay, make more labels. Yeah.
So I certainly had to keep that one and put it somewhere where I'd see it. Okay, I'm going to interrupt ourselves a few times here because I'm realizing that some things I could have explained a little bit better or more clearly. So one thing we skipped over completely was just how all this stuff got routed. So underneath the laptop on my little desktop there is a Motu Ultralight AVB audio interface. And so the routing for that is shown here. On the input side, I've got my guitar coming in on one channel, and that gets routed to several channels inside Ableton. One for the guitar loop at the beginning, one for just regular lead guitar playing, and one for the guitar channel that feeds into the vocoder. Then there's an input coming from Pete's Ableton rig, and he's just parked. He's triggering a few sounds in a drum rack. The orchestra hit, which I harvested from, I think, a Roland, I forget what it was. It was a classic Roland orchestra hit that I started with and then layered it a couple of times to try to get it to sound like the one in the Kendrick performance. The next input was the output from the Digitech vocalist that we're using for the sax octave down effects, and that there was a second mic used for that, and then it would come out into its own input, but that wasn't working out so well, so we ended up not using that at all. We just affected the sax with software. So the sax is going into that cloud mic and into the lunchbox, the API lunchbox, where this channel is the Neve mic pre for the saxophone, then into an input on the Motu, and then the EAD is the drum module that gives us the stereo output of the drum kit. It's like a full mix of the drum kit coming in just left and right through the API 512s and then into the Motu. On the output side, the mains left and right are going to speakers that I had off during the performance, but we would switch on to check our playback and stuff, and just to put on music while we're setting up and breaking down. And then mono outputs for Pete and Marcus, and the headphones right out the front of the Motu for me. And so the three of us each had a separate mix, all controlled within the Motu control panel. So you can see this is the device preset that I set up for the performance, and right now the names are somewhat incorrect because I'm coming up on the so you can see I'm flashing on this Pete top, which is Pete's laptop, but that's just because I loaded up this preset to show how we were configured. So on the mixer, this is a software interface for the Motu hardware. So the mixing that I'm doing here on the Motu control panel is actually controlling the hardware in order to provide monitor mixes for me on the main mixer that goes out to the headphones, and also monitor mixes for both Pete and Marcus. That way I could adjust their, the mixes that they were monitoring more easily. And it meant that Ableton didn't have to do it, right? Doing it all with the hardware this way meant that it was much less latency and a lot less work for Ableton. Over here, I just had the, the Launchpad X is hooked up over USB, and the Akai LPD8 is hooked up over USB. Those are both sending MIDI in both directions. The ROLI is hooked up over Bluetooth, which is nice because obviously I had a USB cable connected to the Motu, and then I've got a power cable, and that uses up my 4 ports on the laptop. And I'd rather not use like a hub or anything if I can avoid it. So it's nice to be able to have the ROLI be wireless. It's kind of cool that it can be wireless anyway. I think that's about it for the wiring. I'd see it. And my pedal board, which, there's a talk box over here that I use doing the Brian and the cassette stuff, but that's basically what the vocoder is doing, right? And all the delay and stuff. This whole half I wasn't really using. It was just the Octaver. The Univibe is pretty much always on. That's my brand, is like wannabe Jimi Hendrix sound, right? And then a few overdrives.
And you wouldn't have been able to use a talk box with the mask on anyways.
Good point.
Yeah. You'd use the one with the hole in it, like I was trying to. Yeah, didn't really work, but whatever.
And then my trusty Stratocaster. Her name's Ella. I've had that since high school. It's got a good kill switch going there.
Yeah, it's nice.
And a sustainer pickup, which is kind of crucial for the whole like play the keyboard and the guitar at the same time. My fingertips are all torn up, don't get me wrong, from just playing guitar one-handed, trying to activate notes. But once they're activated, and once you're in there and the strings are ringing, the sustainer pickup allows me to just hold the notes forever and not have to keep going back and picking and stuff, so that way I can do that more easily. So these guys already know this about me, but I wanted to explain a little bit of the backstory here. This video is older. This is like over 10 years ago, at the Warper party in New York, when I first started playing around with the idea of playing keyboards and guitar at the same time. I've still never really spent any time practicing it or developing my technique. I need to start doing that now. I just recently got back into doing it, but now that I've been using the sustainer pickup in my guitar for a few years, it's a lot easier to play the guitar one-handed. And now that I've introduced the ROLI as the keyboard interface, I can be a lot more expressive on that side. So I think that I've got the system configured really well together. But what I was always trying to do with this was just try to be like a one-man Iron Maiden, so I can do parallel third harmonies with myself. So yeah, I need to tighten up the technique a bit, but that's what I'm going for. And a whammy bar.
Yeah.
And I've got the little the little clip-on tuner on the headstock. I have this. I think this is hilarious. In my guitar case, I put the whammy bar and the tuner in the one little pocket together, and I always joke that they're going to argue the whole time because they're like horses. The whammy bar always wants to put the guitar out of tune. But the thing I meant to take it off because I never really thought of this, but I remember Steve Jenkins saying something in some Twitter or Facebook thing about like basically dissing on guitar players that go on stage with these clip-on tuners saying you look like one of those guys in like the early 2000s with like a big Bluetooth earpiece walking around. And I was like, I never thought of that, but it's so true. It's such an ugly looking thing to have sitting there. And he was also like, just tune your guitar already, and it's, yeah, but I forgot and I totally left it on there and it's in the whole thing. So sorry, Jenkinhammer. Oh, saxophone.
Yep.
There it is.
So I don't know if, there's a pretty good angle. I couldn't really get a good angle because it's so gigantic.
Yeah, it's big.
And the cloud microphone
I like that thing.
I've had that for a while, and one of the only reasons I've kept that, even though I've sold so many other things, was because Marcus, whether you're playing alto or Barry, it's like my go-to microphone for you. What can you tell us about this instrument?
Sure. Yeah, it's a baritone sax, low A. It's a copy of a very expensive one because I didn't want to spend $8,000, so I spent $2,000. So yeah, goes down to, what would that be? C2 on the piano, so it's pretty low. And it's got if you work on it, you can actually make it go pretty high too, which is nice. Yeah. It's not that easy to do, but you can. And I like it because it sounds like very angry.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the because I always knew you as an alto player. You always were an alto player for many years, but then when you got into that, I was like, oh, that's great, because that allows us to do, like, in the overclock orchestra kind of world where we kind of got to take turns playing bass and stuff, but it also just gives you kind of like a wider range to play around with.
Right.
But yeah, I think, can you talk about this stuff? What about this stuff?
Yeah, that's my hands are I don't know. I don't know if they're big or they're small, but it was making me do some weird stuff with my wrist. So I had to build those keys up. So there's this little tiny bead stuff you can buy. It's called friendly plastic. And you put it in hot water and it melts, and then you wrap it around something and it will make the shape of what you want. So I made those keys bigger. They're kind of gross looking, like, yeah, saxophone boogers or something, but but it works, my wrist doesn't hurt. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I guess there's a shot here of the whole scene.
Oh yeah, there you go.
It's funny because when I go there, a lot of the times that round table that's usually in that corner is like my preferred spot if I'm going with a crowd of people to eat. And so it's funny when we're setting up, I'm like, I'm going to set up here in my spot.
Yeah, it's your spot. That's funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's this good picture too that Pete had. Pete's got like the nice camera on you got like a new iPhone, so you got like the
yeah.
That's cool.
Which is also, that's the one that was used for the above you.
Yeah.
Above the drums shot.
Yeah,
all right.
like
so what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that picture looks like half a drum set and half some kind of like weird portal.
Yeah, right.
Well, it is, man. And I've got the whiteboard, so that's like our
that's the roadmap.
Yeah,
that's our map.
Trying to figure that one out, everybody.
Yeah. I'm orange.
Yeah.
Marcus is the light greenish, and Pete is the pinkish purple. And everybody's supposed to go off at the end. Goof. What I wanted to have was, these ones that are called ready. These are the ones that are like, I have to open that one before we do a take, because once we would do a take, I'd have to save it because all the audio has been recorded in there, including like the saxophone sampling bits. So then I'd have to clean it all out. So the best thing to do was just save it and then reopen this like ready one every time. And this has got all the stuff. Yeah. All right. So my settings, let's check my settings. This all looks pretty good. Yes. ClyphX on the LPD. Don't control surface that. Oh yeah. This is a cool thing. This particular session, every time I open it, Live unexpectedly quits at least once, sometimes twice. it hasn't actually quit, clearly. I think it's some kind of interference going on with the vocal synth plugin I'm using for the vocoder. I think it hangs for a minute and it makes Live think that it has quit. But that was reassuring going into this performance, knowing that every time I would open up the session, it would give me a big error.
Big no.
Yeah,
a big no.
It's gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that all looks good. Real quick addendum to this. I realized I didn't talk about any of the MIDI settings at all. So it's probably good to just blast through that real quick. So I'm using, obviously, the IAC driver I'm about to discuss. That's just a software environment that you can send your MIDI to and from, keeping it inside the laptop. I'm about to explain that in our little Zoom meeting. But the other stuff that's hooked up is the Launchpad X, which is only being used for track control. It's not set up to send any remote signal like triggering clips or controlling any parameters. Nothing like that. It's just sending MIDI notes into tracks for the bass line and for the finger drumming stuff and for the sliced up saxophone samples. There's also MIDI going out to the Launchpad from a track. That way I can light it up. The Ultralight has a MIDI port, but I'm not using that at all. I think next time maybe we'll use that with Pete's drum modules to get the kick MIDI triggers. The Seaboard block is connected over Bluetooth again, and that's also just for track input, just for the FM8 patch, and not sending any remote signals. But the LPD8 is only sending remote signals. It's not set up to trigger notes into a track at all. You can see that's routed through the ClyphX Pro driver. So it's set up under the control surface menu so that it's using the ClyphX Pro like scripting environment, and the LPD8 is feeding through that. That allows me to hardwire some of the knobs to certain settings without needing to MIDI map them. And that can be nice because that way it can follow the selected track as opposed to being locked the way just MIDI mapping would normally be to just one track. This way I can, especially because I'm creating new tracks as I'm sampling the saxophone. So the encoder bindings there allow me to follow the selected track and have it always be like the transpose and the pitch envelope, all that stuff. I guess that's it. So the IAC driver is important here because the IAC driver is this thing that we use sometimes. It's like a Mac OS thing where you can send MIDI out of your software to the IAC driver, and then it comes back into your software, and it looks like MIDI that's coming from somewhere else. What that allows me to do is send MIDI commands from this channel. For example, these guys here. This one clears all the loops for the saxophone bassline, Pete's percussion loop, and my guitar chords. So it clears them on beat 2 at the very beginning by sending those MIDI notes out to the IAC, and then they come back in, and it seems like just like remote notes. Like if you set a MIDI
I didn't even realize that you were in control of when my shaker and cowbell that I looped at the beginning would like turn off and come back in and turn off and come back in.
Well, yeah, that's automated.
I thought that was, I didn't know if you had just set that and let it go, but so you actually had a control to like, once I was playing it, you were capturing it and then it was on. And then you had a button to turn it off and then turn it back on again?
Nope. I automated the whole process.
Yeah, so he was thinking about a few things at the same time. So yeah. If you can automate it, you might as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, so I did this in arrangement view, like left to right style. Normally you do a performance in session view, top to bottom, right? And I could certainly port this over, but because I was kind of thinking in such a linear way about it, I worked it out in arrangement view, and it made it easier to do stuff like this where, so like the percussion looper, clear it is F#3 and turn it on is G3. These are all on MIDI channel 13 for the nerds out there. So all the looper controls are on channel 13, which means that this is sending on channel 13 to the IAC driver. So I'm sending out 3 notes here. One is to clear each of the loopers. I don't know why there's only 2 here. Oh, one of them might be something a little bit different because it's the saxophone thing, which gets a little bit more involved. But then this one triggers the percussion loop. And then, so then you play your loop here. And then this one triggers the guitar loop and I play my loop there. But then over the course of the tune, I have the mute switch automated for those to turn on and off periodically.
Oh yeah.
You know, so like the guitar has to come out during the pre-chorus because the chords change there. And the percussion takes a little break before each hook.
I love myself, right? Yeah.
Yep. And then when the solo kicks in, that's when the guitar is done, the guitar loop. I actually ended up changing this after the fact. I ended up taking out the percussion loop for the first half of the guitar solo because it kind of builds there, you know? So I had the percussion loop just come back in there.
Oh, doing all the snares like on all the downbeats.
Yep, exactly. Because you went into like verse mode at the beginning of that, which is, I think we probably discussed that at some point, somewhere along the way. So that's how a lot of that stuff's working. So now that I have this session up, I'm going to go back to, we can discuss. So this is kind of a funny thing so we filmed this on November 1st. It's currently Friday, November 13th, Friday the 13th, when we're having this conversation, but no one's going to see this until November 19th when we do the live stream, but no one's going to see the video we're making now until after that either. But let's just kind of go through and talk about some of these things. This featuring vocals borrowed from Kendrick. I added that after showing this video to a couple people, and they weren't sure if I was rapping under the mask, which like the 3 of us knew that wasn't happening. Yeah. But I wanted it to hopefully be clearer to people because not everybody knows what a vocoder is in the first place, right? But so yeah, Pete plays the percussion loop once. And now that's looped in. And I play the guitar loop once. And then that percussion loop and guitar loop pretty much go the whole tune until their job is done. So the vocoder here, so I'm playing the ROLI keyboard, and I'm playing an FM8 patch that I made specifically for vocoding stuff. The vocoder, like that could be a whole other video about what a vocoder is, but the basic idea is that you're breaking some sounds, 2 sounds into different frequency bands, and you're taking like sort of the behavior of one of the sounds, in this case Kendrick's a cappella vocal, and you're mapping it to those same bands, like frequency bands in the other sound, which would be the synth sound, so that it sounds like the synth is talking. I'm fully aware that, and this is very on brand for me, I love the sound of a vocoder, and I don't always care if you can hear the words.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I'm really aware that like not everyone's going to understand Kendrick's lyrics here, which is unfortunate because they're great lyrics and all, don't get me wrong. But for me, like, just having that sound was cool enough, kind of, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Like I've made a lot of tracks, a lot of overclock tracks that I've made myself in the past where there's a lot of vocoder, but there's, even when I send it into like the copyright office, I check the lyrics box and they send me a letter back saying, sorry, we couldn't copyright your lyrics because we have no idea what they are, you know?
Oh, wow.
I'm like, that's cool.
That's good. You get away with sampling some stuff that you,
yeah.
You can vocode anybody else you want.
Right. Oh, it's maybe worth mentioning this camera angle since, this is a no budget production, right? And I talked to a few people about potentially coming in and shooting it, but nobody was really interested in being locked in a room with, Marcus blasting droplets at them through a saxophone or anything, or just being indoors, and I don't blame anybody for that. It's it's a global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to get creative on how to shoot it, we did end up using like 7 different little iPhone angles and stuff. But this one was, I have it right here. This goofy little turntable for displaying jewelry or something, with like a GoPro sitting on it, so that it was slowly turning the whole time to try to get slightly more like, I don't know, exciting images.
Yeah,
It worked.
It's like a skate video.
Yeah, it worked out okay,
Yeah.
but the quality of the image is nowhere near as good as some of the iPhones, and there's definitely some like jitter to that little turntable thing. It's a little jagged, but it's still, I think it was good to have that occasionally. The Launchpad there, that's it's a Novation Launchpad X Pro, I believe is the model. And I'm sending MIDI to it to make the heart stuff. I guess I don't have that in this version of the session necessarily. Maybe I do. That's a whole other video I could make too. Yeah, here we go. This lights folder. So this folder is all just MIDI tracks that feed the designs out to that thing.
Wow.
Yeah. It's involved.
Yep.
But it's cool. And there's a lot of MIDI processing that goes into it too, because the color of them is defined by the velocity. So I'm automating the color on these knobs, and then so to make the heart outline is this particular chain where I'm basically making chords that will outline the heart, so that I give it one note here and it makes the heart. So that's all just being played as MIDI out to the thing. And then, so there's the heart pulse where it's changing color, because you can see the color is automated. But then there's other times when I'm doing the sampling where I have it just walking through all the steps. That's these things where it's just kind of walking through to give me a visual of where we are. And then this is the quads thing. That's where it's flashing the quadrants of the Launchpad to also just kind of give me a visual for where we are in the sampling block. And then just one so that when I actually hit a key, it lights up orange.
That's cool.
So then what else happens? Oh, that's the GoPro. It's the cheapest GoPro you could get. And I bought it in the early days of GoPros, and it doesn't have a screen at all. You guys may recall I was setting that up we'll see what this gets. Who knows?
It actually worked out though.
It's not bad. I mean, you can't there's not much detail, but at least it's another angle. It's like a wide shot. I wish I would have realized that Pete wasn't in it, but whatever.
No, I think that was the iPad that I bunked.
Oh, that's the side angle.
Yeah, that's the side angle.
This is the GoPro that was on the shelf in between the dining rooms.
Oh, that's okay. So
but we couldn't tell what it had in its vision anyway. So
yeah, it doesn't have a viewfinder or screen or anything. All right, so then we get to the hook. So I'm playing the two things there. I've got the mice elf. If we go to the finger drumming category here, I shut off these lights. Finger drums. So I've got the mice elf instrument, which is of course the mice, and I found that it had to get chopped up that way, right? Because if I chopped it up as I love myself, playing it actually, you have to play it oddly. If you want to hit it on the beats, it's mice elf, because that's the way you'd sing it, Anyway, but I've got the bassline. And some things I had to do to make that work were split, because the Launchpad is broken up into the 2 columns of 4, right? So the first half of the octave is in one spot, and then the other half of the octave is later on. But I also wanted to make it diatonic. Okay, I can definitely explain this bass line a little bit better than that. So I'm using the Launchpad X is in one of the custom modes, which allows me, it just simplifies the act of lighting things up remotely from Ableton and, you know, animating the cells, all that. And what it means for the MIDI output is that it's going to be a chromatic scale starting here with C1. You can see this on the key map here in Ableton. It's going to start with C1, and then it chromatically works its way up the first 4 rows here, and that ends at, what's that, G3, and this is going to be G sharp 3. So then it continues up here. So in order to have an 8-note scale here, I had to remap these down, but also I wanted it to be not chromatic. I want it to be a C minor scale. So I've basically taken the 2 ranges, constricted these 2 chains in a MIDI effect rack, so that these 4 notes come in on the first chain and these 4 notes come in on the second chain. And then I redefine what they're going to be. So here I'm just remapping the chromatic scale to a C minor scale. And on this one, I'm remapping the upper tetrachord of the scale to be also a C minor, but to drop it down 2 octaves as well, so that they all fall in line together. That way I can play the bass line. I mean, I'm actually playing with this hand, I guess, because I'm playing guitar with the left hand. But that way, when I do the myself, I can walk down at the same time. And of course, the last one is a little different. You know, most of them I'm going, and then because you know the bass line is moving between a C and an F, and on the very last one, of course, I'm going. Just broken up a little bit more on that one, but in between I can, you know, I can noodle around a bit. Of course, the bass is set up to be monophonic, so if a note is still ringing and I play another note, it cuts it off, all that, and the note length here just to make longer notes, so I'm not holding down the keys. I think that's about it for the bass. And right there, the baritone coming in is perfect. Like, I love the idea of you doing like the squeaky stuff that Kendrick does, you know, the voice cracking stuff, you know, with the baritone. Is cool. What else happens here? One thing was just a kind of a happy mistake, I think, was the chorus is a lot of the time, because the bass line is just really C to F, but you know, with some walking around there. But I found that I would regularly miss the last F, but it kind of made the chorus sound cool, like, or the hook, whatever. Like, it stays on C the last time in most of the hooks because I didn't get to the F, you know. But it sounded cool, you know. It did. Because I guess I would get caught up in playing a little bit more guitar on that last one, maybe, or getting ready for the vocoder is probably what it was. So here it gets a little more complicated, because here I'm doing the Sidechainer guitar vocoder thing, or guitar keyboard thing. This is inspired by what I used to do in like marmosets and other things when I would use the Chaos pad. Just for the record, this is us not that long ago. He posted this. Oh, this is from 2017. So this is 3 years ago, but this is a reunion of a band that we were all in many years ago when we used to rehearse upstairs from the restaurant that we filmed the video in.
This is recorded right next door.
Yeah, true. But so I used to always use the Chaos pad as part of that rig. And when I would be soloing, a lot of times I'd do that thing where I'd use it to sample, and then I would be able to play guitar in the sample, but it would mute the input from the guitar when I'd play back the sample. So I'd be able to sustain something on the guitar and then like interrupt it with the sample, and it would pop back and forth, which I would do all the time in the solos, but it was actually written into this tune. And there's something I always loved about that sound, the way it clicks in and out. You know, it's kind of like the kill switch on the guitar. You know, it's like a hard mute, you know. So what I've set up in Ableton between the guitar and the synth is whenever I play the ROLI, the synth part on the ROLI, okay, so here's my vocoder feeder channel, and that's a group that's got the guitar and the synth in it. The guitar has this compressor on it that's sidechained from the synth. So when I'm playing the guitar, if I'm holding a note and then I hit a note on the keyboard, it mutes the guitar until I let go of the keyboard, and it clicks in and out really aggressively.
I like that. Yeah, it's cool.
Know? It's almost like changing the channel on an old TV, like click, 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 you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on in the second and third verse with the keyboard and the guitar. And that switching back and forth between synth and guitar is, bless you, is that's what's feeding into the vocoder. Eventually. Oh, and there's Pete with the SPD, with the piano sample. Bomb.
Yeah.
I wanted to edit the video to make it clear so that you'd get credit for triggering those samples. And then we got another hook, more bass line, more saxophone, more blinking hearts. This one just has more, the third verse has more guitar, synth back and forth. When I was editing the video for that one, I went back and forth a little bit because a lot of it's kind of boring to watch. You know what I mean? I'm like looking down the whole time. We're never in the same shot together.
Yeah.
So anytime there was like one of us like looking up, or you could see our faces a little bit more, I would be like, oh, I got to make sure to go to that camera for that point. And for this one, I was like, oh, well, I moved a little bit there. I got to use that. But again, I wanted to show Pete hitting the sample. So I ended up going split screen. I didn't do much split screen, but I wanted to do it here. But then it's funny the way it ended up. It almost looks like you're like hitting me with the sample.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey.
Oh, and I also had to automate this too, because then at that point I'm just playing guitar that's not side chained. So I had to shut off the side chain so that I could play the keys and have the guitar just ring out and sound like a regular guitar. So I'm automating a bunch of things there so that I don't have to turn them on and off, but that when we get to that point in the tune, the guitar just comes on and it's no longer part of the vocoder or that side chaining thing. I know, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
My poor little computer was doing so much.
Yeah.
More of this, more of that, more of this, more of that, more of this, more of that, some of that. Okay, so then we get to guitar solo, which in the Kendrick tune would be the fee fi fo fum part, but for whatever reason, I never went digging to try to make those samples. It didn't seem like it would be that cool for us to be chanting fee fi fo fum and all that with our masks on and everything. So I just called it a guitar solo. This is another mistake that I made though. What I should have, because I'm also turning some of my pedals on and off on my pedal board. When we got to this part, I meant to have less distortion because I'm using like the raging distortion to feed the vocoder more like texture. But when I got to this part, what's that?
Is that what it's actually called?
What?
Raging distortion?
Raging distortion? No, it's just two different, like an overdrive and a distortion pedal.
Oh, okay. It would have been perfect because when you start your solo, that first note is just like, ah!
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
I like it.
That's the thing. Is it like, that's how it went down. So whatever, it's in there. I'm not going to like overdub stuff on it, you know, but it's not what I intended. I intended to shut off at least one of those two distortion pedals before I got to this part, but And gratuitous whammy bar too. That's also on brand for me. Too much distortion, vocoder where you can't hear the words, and gratuitous whammy bar activity.
Mm-hmm. That's why we love you.
And so here, of course, again, is like without the vocoder, but I'm doing the thing where I'm sustaining a note on the guitar and punching holes in it with the synth, right? So it's doing that back and forth cutting thing. Funny thing happens here though. I purposefully like was playing the flat 2 on the keyboard to kind of change the flavor and make it like a different kind of scale because, you know, because Marcus, you're playing the bass line here, which we can talk about too, but you're just playing a C. There's no chord changes, so I can play whatever I want, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, flat 2, and then I'm playing the flat 7, and so I'm basically playing the keys, and because I'm playing on the 2 different instruments, I notice I'm like, oh, that's the F sharp major chord that I'm playing over here. Not on this hand, but this hand's playing an F sharp major chord. So that's what I went and I did the Star Spangled Banner thing. Because again, this is 2 days before the election, right?
Oh, right.
But because I have not so hot technique on the ROLI just yet, I actually played a natural on the way up. So I did so on the way down, I'm playing the right notes to play Star Spangled Banner in F sharp, which is like the borrowed tritone key of what we're in. But on the way up, I'm playing it as a minor triad just because my finger didn't hit it well.
So it's cool.
So it's like a natural, whereas like that's the B flat or the A sharp would have been the one note in that was actually in the key of C minor. So I got even more out than I meant to, but whatever. It's live.
You mean you meant to do it the whole time?
Yes, I'll edit that whole thing out. I'll edit out my whole thing about playing the wrong note. Oh, so let's talk about the bass baritone. So a fun thing in this performance is that all 3 of us played bass at one point. I'm doing the bass in the hooks. There's no bass in the verses. In the hooks, I'm playing the bass on the Launchpad. And in this section, Marcus is playing the bass. Originally, we were using your Digitech vocalist for the pitch down, but it had a lot of beach sand in it, and it wasn't working out so well.
Yeah.
So we were going to have to find a better hardware alternative for you in the future, but for now, we solved it with software. But yeah, so that's pitch down. There's 2. There's an octave down, and then there's 2 octaves down, which is just mixed in a little bit. So that way you can baseline us. All right, moving on. Oh, there's some Killswitch activity here, which is just, you know, it's we were talking about X-Men arcade games earlier. That's literally a competition grade.
Oh, it's the button. Arcade.
Yeah. Arcade button. Like I bought Chris Haskell helped me to like source the parts because he makes like arcade consoles and stuff. And I just ordered like one of like 8 different switches. Goes back a few years now. And I tried a few out. It's like the dirtiest way to do it. I'm just grounding the signal. So it clicks on the way in and it clicks on the way out, and it's a very dirty, like, but it's great. Again, it's like switching the channel on an old TV, and I love the sound of it. But because it's like a competition grade switch, it's really springy and fast. And of all the ones I tried, it's the one I like the feel of the most. Yeah, that one. Moving on. A lot heavier vocoder here. Went to war last night. I'm using Isotope's Vocal Synth 2, and I'm automating it a lot because there's several different types of vocoder in there. I'm basically automating these in and out throughout the whole thing, and also automating their panning.
Whoa.
So the vocoder style actually changes in each verse, and then for this part, it's like the super heavy version of it. That goes on and on. This is an interesting thing to do. Like, I hadn't really thought about it much until I was editing the video, but like I've memorized the rhythms for all the vocoder stuff, but I'm improvising the notes the whole time. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Really strange thing.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do.
It's cool though. I think it is fun to do, and it's good for my brain somehow.
Yeah.
All right, so we get out of that. This, I wish I would have written something for this part. I mean, in contrast to what I just said about improvising everything. Honestly, just because it's like I wanted to go up with the guitar and down with the synth, and I probably should have written something a little bit more, but that moment there is the reason why I've been over the years slowly building up to a rig like this, so that I can do something squealy in one direction with the guitar and like a dive bomb on the synth at the same time, you know? So I was glad to be able to get there.
It's a cool effect.
Quick side note on the ROLI. I'm absolutely in love with this thing. It's great. And I haven't even really gotten into the polyphonic expression side of it, where you can do multiple fingers moving in different directions, all that. But there was a couple of things that I did in Ableton to make my life a little easier for this performance. For one thing, this particular model it's 2 octaves, but you don't have the extra C at the top. And because we're in C minor, I was going to be wanting that C a lot. I found myself always kind of reaching for it. So I just put in a scale MIDI effect in Ableton to remap all of the B's to be C's. So I can't actually play a B natural, you know, I could bend into it, of course, just because of the nature of the instrument, but I wasn't really going to be needing any B naturals. What that allows me to do is, when a lot of times I want to jump up the octave and get that, you know, the C is not here, but I can get a C because of the way I'm processing the MIDI. And then the other thing is just that there are octave shifting switches here, but there's not really a visual indicator to let you know which octave you're in, and I was going to be moving back and forth a little bit, so I did automate that in Ableton with this other MIDI effect, just to make my life a little easier. So there's really only a couple other things to talk about here. This is, hopefully people have figured out from watching the video, what's happening here is sampling Marcus. We're basically trading 4s, but instead of playing guitar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to then re-trigger slices of the recording of Marcus. You're seeing the output of or the display of Simpler, the Ableton sampler that I'm loading Marcus into, and that also involves the so this is the waveform that you're seeing, and then the slices lighting up as they're getting triggered like that. I just had to do some stuff in Final Cut to make it that little highlighted part bigger. But the way the sampling works was a real hassle. It's that this is the chicken wing portion. In our outline, we called it solos or sampling, whatever, but verbally we called it chicken wing because in the SNL one, he says 1, 2 chicken wing, and it's to count in this part. But what happens here is there's some of this IAC stuff here that's going to trigger, these notes are going to trigger in session view some of these ClyphX scripts. And what this does is it will go to the track called MM, which is just a ghost track that has saxophone at its input, and record a fixed length 4-bar clip. So when that gets triggered, it automatically records Marcus. Okay, so what's happening here with the ClyphX scripting is that on the IAC track, which we've already talked about, I'm sending MIDI notes out to the IAC driver. Those circle back and come back in, appearing to be just remote signals, as though I hit a button on a MIDI controller. So this goes out to channel 13, comes back in, and it would be mapped to some of the slots on the ClyphX channel that I have. And that's over here in the session view. So one of them that I had to add kind of last minute, because I realized sometimes as I'd be messing around with the session, the MM channel wouldn't always be armed. So I had to add that to make sure that the channel named MM would be armed. You can see that there. And then the other trigger is going to start this one. These are all using follow actions in order to just flow top to bottom. So once this one gets triggered, they'll all trigger sequentially. The first one is saying, and this is all just using the ClyphX basic commands. So MM, the track named MM, I'm telling it to record a fixed length clip, 4 bars in clip 1. So if we go over here and we look at what I have, actually that's a stray. What I have here is I have the MM channel, which takes the input from the saxophone. Right now it's using my mic just for an example, but it would be taking the saxophone, and it's a very compressed version of the saxophone. So that way when I get it sampled and chopped up, I have like a really strong signal. I didn't really want it to be dynamic or anything. I wanted it to be compressed and kind of maximized. So this channel, these commands, the record fixed length command is going to record, the first one arms the channel, right? It's turned down all the way so that it doesn't play through. And because that lives inside of this sax sample group, then the effect rack that I have on the group will be maintained as I start adding more channels underneath here. And that's what happens in the second clip here. This is not a built-in command, but this actually goes into the macros file that you build with your ClyphX installation. And you can see I've got a bunch of them here. That first one is calling this command mmbeats1. And what this does is a whole series of commands. It says to take that clip that I just recorded on channel MM, clip slot 1, and this is a ClyphX command to simp, which means load it into a simpler. And then wait 5, which is, I believe that's measured in 10 milliseconds. So 5 means 50 milliseconds. That just gives it enough time so that I can start changing the settings of the simpler, because by default it comes up in settings that I didn't really want. So then I had to do all this stuff. Select or the selected device simpler, put the play mode into slice because I want to slice it up, as opposed to some of the other modes. Actually, let's run one, and then I'll show you why these modes are set this way. So if I go back here and I look at this, if I run it from here, these will trigger and we can watch it happen. It's going to arm it, and then it's going to trigger that one, and we can watch it record one here. 2, 3, 4. I don't hear the click, so I don't know if I'm in time. I'm probably not. Blah, blah, blah. I'm a saxophone. All right. So I recorded that. And now I'm going to stop the transport because some other stuff will go down if I let it keep going. Basically what it's going to do is continue to record additional clips here and load them into additional simplers here. Because it's loading them inside this group, they're all going to flow through this effect rack on the group. So I have some of the LPD knobs and toggle switches or momentary toggles set up to control things in this effect rack. So no matter which one I'm playing, it'll work. I'm gonna have to arm this real quick, and let's see. Oh, I guess it's worth mentioning the light game that's going on here. As it's recording, it's white with the little red Pac-Man to indicate to me where it's at during the recording process. Let me actually just run that real quick. So while it's recording, it's white with red, and then when I'm playing back, it's blue with orange. The reason why I did this, it's purely for display and for me. The idea being that as it's going down, it kind of gives me a visual as he's playing, so I can think of it. I don't have to necessarily like translate what he's playing into musical terms and then translate it back to the grid. I can just think about it as the grid. So if he's playing and something cool happens here, I don't have to necessarily think that's bar 2, the and of beat 3. So what that allows me to do is just think a little bit more like spatially, as far as like if something went down on these 16th notes, that's where they're going to be when I go to trigger them, if that makes sense. So back to actually playing this. If we have a look here, I'm going to gain this up because it wasn't much of a recording. 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3, or I don't see. There's going to be some dead ones. But all the modes that I had to switch here are meaningful. So the first thing it's going to do after I've recorded the clip into the channel, it's going to grab that, move it to a simpler, wait 50 milliseconds, and then change that device's play mode to slice. So I want slice because the other modes, classic and one shot, would not be as useful for what I'm doing here. The whole idea is that I want to slice it up into 16th notes, and then change it to gate on. So the difference between trigger and gate is really that if it's in trigger mode, it's going to play, or I don't hear the click, so I don't know if I'm in time. I'm probably not. Blah, 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 I'm a saxophone. And it's going to just play through the whole thing. Whereas gate, it'll stop when I let go. 4, 4, 4, right? I also want to put the slice mode into beat. The difference there would be, by default, it's transient, which is cool and could be really useful in other times, but that adds a whole nother element of kind of chaos to this. By doing it in beat mode and setting it to 16th notes, I could have 4 bars, fill up the launch pad in a predictable manner, because I kind of have to react immediately. Easier to think of it as 64 16th notes. The next thing is to set it to warp mode. So if it's not in warp mode, when I pitch shift it, the higher pitched ones will be shorter and the lower pitched ones will be longer and slower. And while that's, again, cool in some cases, in this case, I actually preferred the way it sounded if I was able to pitch it up and have them still be the same length. In this particular, it might have actually been cool to have a switch to flip that on and off, but maybe next time. Change the warp mode to complex instead of beats. Play mode through, so that kind of goes in combination with the trigger gate. So through is what causes it to play. If I hold it down, it will continue to play from that slice. Blah, I'm a saxophone. As opposed to mono, where it would just blah, 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 just give me the 1/16th note. So I definitely wanted it to be gate and through. Blah, so that way I could start wherever I wanted. I'm probably, I don't hear blah, and if I held it down, it would keep playing. The next command here, the mult 0, that the mult parameter changes depending on what mode you're in. So because I'm in beat mode, the mult defines the subdivisions. If you're in transient, it defines the sensitivity, so on and so forth. Oh, and this was a little tricky. I then had to tell it to arm the channel so that I could play it, right? And then waits 15. By using the S in this command, that actually, instead of the milliseconds that it uses here, this uses beats. So I could say, wait 15 beats and then unarm it. Otherwise, as I'm stacking up all these channels of simplers, they're all armed. And every time I go to play one, it's playing all of them. So this allows me to temporarily arm and then unarm it as it starts recording the next one. So what I end up with after doing a take is I end up with a bunch of clips recorded here and then an associated simpler with that clip loaded up within that group. And so that's one of the reasons why I couldn't really do more than one take without saving and relaunching the ready session in order to start over. with a clean take. Another part of that is because I'm only set up to do 8 trades, because there's probably a better way to do this with variables, but for now, I'm still kind of new to this approach. So I have to define clip 1, clip 2, clip 3, clip 4 every single time. Same thing with the commands to create the clips. There's probably a better way to do it so that I could just do an infinite amount of them. But for now, I was kind of stuck with this. Also, I should mention that this whole process of having it recorded, or not the recording part, but taking the recorded clip and slicing it into the simpler and changing all the settings, even though that's all automated by the scripts, it takes a little bit of time. And that's why I'm not able to start playing back as soon as Marcus is done playing. I kind of come in like a few beats later. In hindsight, I realized that maybe it would have been better to just record like his first like 14 beats or something, and then use the last 2 beats to do the processing. That way I could come in on the downbeat. Maybe I'll do that next time. We'll see. So basically all of these are stepping through and recording 4 bars of Marcus and then loading it into a sampler for me. Recording Marcus, loading it into a sampler. And that's how that entire section goes down.
So it records and allows you to sample it and then erases it.
It doesn't erase it. They actually end up getting recorded in this view, in session view, in this channel, and I keep them there. And that's why after each take I would save the session and I'd open the ready session again to start over with a blank one.
Yeah, because I was actually, that was something I was going to ask you, because I didn't know if you were recording and it was recording in like take form, where like you have the one track and it's recording a take and then like all of a sudden making another virtual take and then making another virtual take.
No, because I'm mixing between arrangement view, and some tracks are running in session view. You know, so some stuff is happening in this view while the rest of the stuff is happening in arrangement view. And I'm like recording you in arrangement view and the guitar and the saxophone in arrangement view. But in session view here, some of that other stuff is happening simultaneously. You know, it's weird.
Is that where my kick / bass drum?
Yeah. Let's
my bass parts are coming from.
Let's move on to that. Let's get back to this. So more of that. So we did a bunch of these. And to be clear, I did edit some stuff out. For one thing, it was hard. It was hard to like focus so much on what Marcus was playing. That's one of the reasons why I had the visual on the Launchpad of walking through the steps, so I could see where he was getting recorded and where it was going to be when, like, a moment later when it was my turn to play it back. Because it's one thing to like sit down with something and be like, okay, honk, hook, heek, hook, okay, took it to honk, but to like hit buttons and not know what they're going to sound like was like so stressful, you know. And it was hard to be musical with it, but once we did it a few times, I got better at it. And when it came down to it, like I kept 6 of the trades. I basically leaned on the ones that were the most interactive between the 3 of us, because I think the thing that's cool about this is when the thing that I'm doing can be a musical instrument that's part of a band like this. Right. So when we're able to listen to each other and play off of each other, that's what seemed most exciting. So those are the ones I kept. And I also tried to keep ones that were consecutive, because that's where that kind of stuff was going to happen. Yeah.
There's more interplay in those, definitely.
Yeah. Right. But we did way more than 6. And there were definitely some that were not good. But in the future, I think I'll be much better at this. And in hindsight, what would have been much easier is if I recorded like you doing the hook, and I knew what it was going to be, and I just used that every time.
Gotcha.
This is, I think, more interesting, but it's way more complicated.
Yeah,
because I'm basically presented with a new sound palette every 4 bars. You know.
Right.
But it's cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You-
So
I
what's
was
that,
gonna
Pete?
say, do you want to talk about how you got how you took the one bass tone per bar and applied my kick drum to it?
Yes, because that's actually happening during this too. I was thinking that was happening later, but that's happening during the chicken wing section, right? So this is where you, Peter, take over the bass line, and the way that that works is again side chaining, but it's the other kind of side chaining. Instead of side chaining a compressor to make it duck, I'm side chaining a gate to make it open. So I basically have a bass line, just a sustained whole note on the chords, C, B flat, was it C, B flat, A flat, and then G for half a bar. And you don't hear it until the kick drum hits, and the kick drum opens up the gate so that you can hear the bass only when the kick is hit. So that's how we get this effect. Bum-ba-da-dum-ba-bum. So Pete's controlling the bass line with his kick. He's not controlling the pitch of it. That's like pre-configured. But when the bass is heard is directly connected to the kick drum. And that came from when we did the Bounty Hunters track. That's how I did the bass line for the Bounty Hunters track.
That's right.
Which I can set up a link to as well. But so we didn't actually use your MIDI for your kick drum this time, but we could do that in the future. We could use the MIDI to trigger notes, and I could just automate what note is going to get triggered.
Right.
Even probability of like whether it's going to be a C or a B flat. So that way you can do some like ding 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 kind of stuff,
Yeah. I think we had talked about it at your house, but it was one of those things where like we had a rehearsal pretty much where you're sitting right now. And then that day we had reconfigured, we weren't going to be recording with my laptop in my Ableton. We were just going to be sending you everything. And then we, switched a couple of things, and it was just like, okay, we'll use MIDI next time.
Yeah. I think the other thing that came from it was that I didn't have like a 20-foot MIDI cable.
Right.
If I did, even at the studio, I have those connectors that's XLR to MIDI, just so you can send MIDI over a mic line through the wall. If I had those here, we could have just used a mic cable, but it was a cabling issue. But yeah, next time we'll do that because we could do more cool stuff with it that way. I guess the only other thing to talk about here is that we're playing Iron Man at the end. Because the way I had arranged the tune is it was like it basically ended with the sampling, and it was like, it's not much of a climax, and as you guys know from working with me many times, I prefer to write big long tunes that end in halftime with a big epic change, right? And I was like, it needs a big epic ending like War Pigs or Iron Man. And then I realized like it's the Iron Man chord progression at the end of Iron Man. Ba-no-no, 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 bum, 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 ba-no-no-no, but over that kind of bass line. So that's why I ended up doing that. And then we've, of course we had to have some kind of weird oblong hits at the very end. So it would sound like us. And I still don't know, like, so there was a little bit of discussion we had that day about whether there were triplets or dotted eighths. And I was thinking dotted eighths. But then afterward, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, when I'm like the Iron Man thing, I don't know if I'm playing triplets or dotted eighths leading up to this. When like the hits, I know we decided dotted eighths, but when I'm just playing that beforehand, bum, 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 bum.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think you're playing like
I'm playing keyboard and guitar at the same time, and I'm recording, and I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, two hands doing different things.
It's tricky, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing in doing all that was switching back to thinking about things in musical terms like that. I guess that's pretty much all we had to say. All I had to say about this. Is there anything else you guys wanted to say about this?
No, that was a blast though.
Yeah, it was fun.
The only thing I have to say is the next one's going to be better.
Yeah.
That may be true, although the next one may be less complicated.
I think it should be.
Because that was a lot.
Let's put a highlighter on maybe.
Okay, fair. It's fair.
It might get worse.
The next one will start less complicated.
Yeah. for sure.
But yeah, no, it was fun. I mean, it's fun to hang out with you guys anyway.
Yeah,
But it was
absolutely.
fun to like be in a room with other human beings and playing music and all that. And
Yeah, I know, right? It's been
Yeah, it
a
was.
couple months.
yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I'm going to shut this down and
Cool.
I'm
All right.
going to go chop it up into some kind of video that somebody might want to watch someday.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
I want to thank you both again for doing it in the first place and for coming back to talk about it.
No, of course.
Absolutely.
It's fun, man.
All right.
Yeah, fun times. See you guys.
Right.
All right. I'm going to pretend that I hang up right now, but I'll just stop recording.